My name is Mitch, Senior Data Scientist here at Assurance. I'm going to be your speaker for today's talk. Really excited to share the Assurance and Starburst story with you all. It's a fantastic tool. And specifically, we're going to be digging into how we accelerated time to insight, improved customer conversion rates, and enabled robust modeling across the business. But I think more broadly, the story is really about how we achieved better business outcomes with Starburst, powered by Trino, like how we actually solved some pretty critical business problems. So a little bit about myself. I'm Canadian, born and raised in Toronto. And I actually am presenting from the Seattle headquarters today, which is quite exciting. Recently moved here. But I started my career in software as a service space, where I wore many hats at early stage companies. During that time, I saw the world of business was changing pretty rapidly, especially in technology. And the demands for data and insights just exploding. So that made me want to seek out more information and learn new skills. So I completed a master's of analytics 2017. I haven't looked back. I've worked on a couple of data teams since then, but now I've been at Assurance for about 2.5 years in the central intelligence unit, where we are responsible for real-time monitoring, KPI reporting and tracking with stakeholders, self-service data tools, and also generating insights around the business. So for some background on Assurance, I'm sure you're all wondering, what is Assurance? What do we do? We are an online distribution platform for insurance and also financial products that operates between consumers who are looking for coverage for their needs, the agents that have the know-how and expertise to educate them on what those products are, and then the actual interface into the world of the hundreds and thousands of those products that exist on the market. I'm sure if you've ever tried to buy insurance, I'm sure we all know how complicated it is. There's a lot of jargon, a lot of terminology, rules and regulations you have to be aware of, which is quite complex. So our mission is really to just make it radically easy for customers to navigate that complex world so that we can find the right type of coverage and products for their needs, whether that's today or into the future. So how do we do that? Of course, we do it with data. This is Data Nova, a data conference. Data is a core part of everything that we do. And we leverage data science and the human touch to optimize that entire experience for each type of marketplace participant, whether they're a shopper or an agent. So we can see here as an example, as customers, as they progress through their buying journey with us, we are running models at each step to generate the right recommendations for them to optimize their experience. And things like product recommendations, as an example, they're going to draw on lots of different data points, like form responses that shoppers are putting in on our websites, how they engage with the actual platform, some basic customer data that we might be able to pull from third parties, the details about the insurance policy offerings themselves. The list goes on and on. Now, of course, it's really easy for me to be here today, standing on the shoulders of giants and saying, yeah, like we could do all this amazing stuff with our data, but that certainly was not always possible. So in the before times, BT or before Trino, as I like to say, we really struggled to join data from one database to another. Like our engineers would typically have to copy data across manually for data scientists to just do pretty basic stuff, like run their dashboards, create reports, and then more sophisticated things like building models from 2 or more disparate data sets. And that was a big problem. We could not scale to the needs of the business. Each of these teams, the stakeholders, the technical folks, all fighting to be at the top of data engineering's backlog. And that really was hamstringing our time to insight. It was often taking weeks to deploy the data that was necessary to manage and improve our business. So we can see here, data scientists are underutilized. They're not being as productive as they could be. Stakeholders don't know what the heck's going on. And of course, the business completely on fire in the background during all of this. But now we have Trino and we have Starburst. It's really hard to believe that we actually ever existed in a world before this, where a single point of access to all data isn't the norm. It's actually a really big privilege. I'm definitely grateful for our data engineering team for setting this up. It's helped us unlock a ton of business value, and that is exactly what we're going to dive into today. And in order to do that, I did want to narrow our focus just a little bit to just one part of the Assurance business, our Medicare line. You can see we sell lots of different kinds of insurance and financial products, but I did want to focus on Medicare for reasons that we'll go into And I'm going to share how we unlock business outcomes for this line of insurance that we manage. So we're going to set the business context first for what Medicare is and why it's important. And then we're going to dive into 3 distinct mini case studies for actual business problems that we've solved here at the company, thanks to Starburst and Trino. So what is Medicare? For those who don't know, it's a federal health insurance program that's run by the government of the United States. It's for individuals that are 65 or older, or younger folks that have disabilities, or perhaps have more advanced diseases like kidney failure. It's a really useful program, really beneficial. It allows people to enroll in the program and have the government cover their medical expenses. However, that's a really big and complex job for the government to run. So they've actually partnered with the private sector through their Medicare Advantage program to give consumers the choice to actually pick their own plans, and to decide, to evaluate what's out there and actually, based on their own needs, decide on a plan that works best for them. The insurance carriers can offer better economies of scale. The government pays them directly. It's a win-win for everyone. It's super important. And why it's important for assurance is, it's for the majority of individuals that are enrolling in Medicare plans, you can actually only do it once per year during what's called the Medicare Annual Enrollment Period, or AEP for short. You may hear me refer to that a few times, AEP. Now, the AEP period, 7 weeks long, and that's when you become eligible to enroll in a new plan or change your plans with those private carriers. But Medicare is incredibly complex. Like, your eligibility for what plan you can enroll in, what the government will authorize, it really depends on so many factors, like your medical history, where you live, all the way down to your state, zip, and county level, whether your doctor's in and out of network. And there's a ton of alphabet soup of plan types. I've been working here for several years. I still don't know all of them. I can only imagine how difficult it would be for that elderly person not comfortable with technology, having to look up all this information themselves. And on top of that, there's hundreds of carriers that you could potentially enroll with, and that makes it just extra challenging. But what that leads to is shoppers, they want help. They want to be able to navigate this complex space, and that causes our shopper demand, and the call volumes just explode on our platform. The AEP period is just a huge area of focus for us, and you can see that data there, just the massive influx of shoppers that come in. We spend a huge portion of the year preparing for this just 7-week period, because that's where the majority of our revenues come from. And that is the lens in which I wanted to share with you all today, how Trino comes into play here and how its single point of access is so important for us to deliver on those critical business problems. So the first one, let's jump right into that case study, what I call preparing to launch, or optimizing our agent licensure strategy. So a little more context here, to understand this business problem, we have to first recognize that there's a key condition here, and this is a legal requirement, is that in order to enroll a shopper in a Medicare plan from one of our carriers that's part of our marketplace, agents have to first be licensed by the state that the shopper lives in. So I'm in Washington State right now. If I was seeking Medicare for any reason, I would have to speak with an agent who happens to have a Washington State license. And then in order for them to sell me a product or enroll me in a product, I have to be appointed by at least one carrier in that state as well. And that leads to a pretty interesting and complex business problem, which is, how many state license and carrier appointments should we buy for each of our agents so that we can maximize our profit over the annual election period? So the proposed solution that some pretty great colleagues came up with was to use a mixed integer optimization model. What's great about this model is that it allows us to really think about our problem and define our constraints based on the conditions of our platform. Then we can go and get data and feed it in to the model, data we think is relevant. We use Garobi as the tool to handle this. And then we can iterate over many scenarios. We can then output the results of those scenarios and analyze them to identify those optimal solutions. In order to build something like that, we have to think about our business. And here's some key things to consider for a business problem like this. The first and most important, sort of the crux of the issue, is the state licensure and carrier appointments. They're not free. They cost time for our team to help agents enroll in, or get appointed with rather, and they cost a lot of money. We have quite a quite a few agents on our platform, and this cost line can go into the tens of millions of dollars. This is a really important thing to figure out, and to figure out early as well, because once we figure out the solution, we still have to get everybody licensed. On top of that, agents have varying levels of skill, so we have to take into account the fact that not all agents are equal when it comes to simulating conversion rates and performance. Agents also work at various times. So when we are trying to manage sufficient agent coverage to take all the phone calls that come in, we have to consider the fact that the behavior is not consistent at all times. And to make matters even more complex, there's the shopper element, the actual consumer behavior, and that can vary seasonally depending on the hour of day, the day of week, the week of the year. This is really important to figure out as well. If we have those capacity imbalances, if we have an influx of shoppers from a particular state at a certain time, we don't have enough agents licensed in that state, we're going to miss out on business opportunities to have higher conversion rates and to improve the top line revenue. So, those are our sort of data inputs that we might consider. There are more, but that's just to get us started there. And in a perfect world, to get our model outputs, all we would have to do is something like this. We could just do a simple select star from some clean and pristine table that we think exists. But that's just not how the real world works at all. As I'm sure a lot of the folks on the call know, data is generated from all different kinds of processes. Different teams own different systems that produce data. That data is stored in multiple locations and formats as well. For example, in this situation, this is what it may have looked like in the BT times before Trino. We would have had all this data in different sources, on local machines where humans are inputting their domain knowledge. And then we would have to come up with a way to aggregate all this information in an area where the Garobi tool can ingest. And that may have taken weeks, if not, it could take months. There's a lot of friction points in the old world, coordinating across multiple teams to aggregate all that information in one place. But with Trino, that is no problem at all. So we can see here in this new mixed integer world powered by Trino, Trino is really the centerpiece that kicks off the model development, its execution, the publishing, and analysis. It's just accelerated massively by the fact that a data scientist doesn't have to worry about the complexities in the top left area of the screen there. Collating that data, putting it into a consistent format, what have you. We can actually focus on the right side of the equation, which is the actual analysis and model formulation. And on top of that, if we have new ideas, it's very easy to add new data into the data lake or find it in the data lake and bring it into that model development process with very little friction at all, not having to open new data connections and doing all these extra steps. So super powerful process. We were able to complete this. I think it was just a week or two rather than potentially months. And what that allowed us to do is achieve some pretty awesome business outcomes. So as we mentioned, accelerating time to insights, we were able to do this quite quickly. That gave us the jump on the licensing process itself. So we were able to get more agents licensed in time for the kickstart of that critical period. They're ready to enroll shoppers. Shoppers can get enrolled. We make sales. Everybody wins. That's just an improved user experience all around. We also have robust model development, enabling us to try many different scenarios and get to that optimal solution. And that has two sort of similar but distinct business outcomes as well. With the right state licensure mix, agents will have sufficient coverage and better products or more products to offer consumers. And that allows us to have a higher likelihood of making a conversion, increasing our conversion rates, and increasing revenue as a result. And then lastly, and for sure the most important, is that reduced cost line. We estimate that our optimal solution resulted in a reduction of about 40% on that multi-million-dollar cost line, which is just a huge impact on the bottom line. So that concludes case study number one. I'm going to jump over to case study 2 here. This is the lightning talk after all. So case study number 2, when logging just won't cut it. So to set some context here, we had done all that prep work. We did all that work. We got all the agents licensed and ready. Everybody's on the phones, raring to go, day one. All the employees here at the Assurance HQ firing up their computers to look at our real-time logging tool to see how day one was progressing. We're all fired up. And then, of course, we log in and this is what we see. Our real-time logging tool that we configured for our KPIs could just not handle the amount of requests from our employees at all. It was day one of this annual election period, and we were flying completely blind. And why is that so important for us? Well, real-time data, it's just essential for technology businesses today. The digital space is inherently unobservable without data streams to measure it. And especially important for assurance, we essentially operate virtual contact centers. It's not like there's agents all around this headquarters here and we can just pop our heads out and say, hey, what's going on? This is a distributed system all around the states. Agents log in from their computers all around. It's really important for us to have insight into what's going on, to understand if even just basic functions are operational. Like if shoppers can go on the websites, if they can submit forms and consent to contact, are we dialing them when they request it? And many others as well. And not only that, these are rare cases when this stuff breaks, but where the real time is even more important for us on a day-to-day basis is actually optimizing the business as we're running through the day. So for example, if we see an influx of shoppers hit our website, we can see that in the real-time data. It might be because a TV ad, like the one Danny Glover stars in, has played across the network in a way that we don't have full control over. So these are unpredictable spikes in demand. If we see that, we're going to proactively reach out to our agent force to get them on the phones so that we can balance our supply and demand. So as you might imagine, the real-time logging tool goes down, major crisis. Everybody's running around, hair on fire, the Slack channels are blowing up, the Zoom calls are ringing off the hook. And then I remember distinctly Nick, our VP of data science at the time, coming out of his office and saying, hey guys, like central intelligence, data engineering, like what do we do? And this was the light bulb moment. Our director of engineering, Callum, who had a pretty big role in setting up Starburst and Trino, just came up with that light bulb moment. Let's replace it with the data lake. Really unique idea. And that is actually exactly what we did. So through this relatively simple 5-step process, what we did was first inspect the logging tool, the indexes, what data it was using for those charts, cross-checked it against what was available in the already large Trino catalog of connections. We identified some data gaps, subscribed to new streaming events for those gaps, and we started writing them down to our S3, which Trino can connect to. And then we connected Tableau to Starburst, powered by Trino. That was pretty much it. It's actually not too hard at all. And what resulted was real-time analytics powered by Trino. So we can see here, very similarly to the last slide that we had of the schematic, the data sources kind of abstracted away for us. We don't have to worry about sources and formats. We just plug into that single source, and we were able to build this beautiful and insightful dashboard very quickly and ship it to stakeholders and get back to business as usual. So some of our business outcomes as a result of this, really happy to share some of these. So that massive accelerated time to insight, thanks to some foresight, some quick thinking on Callum's part, and Trino, having us configured that single point of access, we're able to shine that light back on our operations. What could have taken days or even weeks to replace, having to coordinate across multiple teams, collate the data, put in a central store, et cetera. All the while not being able to optimize the business, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of inefficiencies. It took us less than 3 hours to replace it. Massive win. And as a bonus outcome, we were able to actually do it quick enough to present that dashboard, the company all hands that afternoon, which was a big win for us internally as a data science team to step up and replace a tool in times of crisis using our existing tool set. And the dashboard's still used daily, tens of thousands of views. And it's very low maintenance as well, which enables us data scientists to work on higher value things rather than fighting fires. And lastly, this was really great too. We were able to bring in new data via the single point of access in Trino and create new visualizations for actual insights for our operators. For example, one of our data scientists created a sales prediction model, which helped communicate to us whether we were above or below expectation throughout the day, given lead volumes, agent capacity, what have you, to tip off operators what levers they should go pull. So that concludes case study number 2 on how we leveraged Trino and Tableau to build a real-time solution. Okay, so now let's jump over to mini case study number 3. We resolved that crisis, got our line of sight back, and now our final mini case, those rockin' recommendations for our customers, plan recommendations. So the question here really is, how do we determine the right product for a customer? And of course, the answer is through data. And this slide just gives some insight into the kinds of data that we might be using to generate a plan recommendation for someone. And I do just want to point out one particular case, because we're going to come back to it, is that third-party data. So this is data we might hit an API and get data back from an aggregator like eBureau for a credit score, something like that. And I also want to remind everyone that Medicare is super complex. There's a ton of details related to the kinds of care that one's eligible to receive on each plan. So we definitely don't expect to get everything right on the first try. Our first model deployment, that's going to be a learning process for us, especially if we're focusing on a product that's new and haven't had a lot of experience selling before. So we need a rapid development process. We need to be able to very quickly design our model, implement it, evaluate it, and improve it. This is extremely important in a period like Medicare AEP, because when we think about the volume of shoppers and how we're compressing a ton of a year's activity and revenues into a single 7-week period, it's a super high stakes game. If we have under optimized models in production, that's going to lead to inefficiencies and potentially leaving revenue on the floor. So really important business problem to unlock here. And that's where Trino comes in. It's a critical piece of this rapid development process. So in this schematic here, you can see, again, Trino is kind of the centerpiece of it. Much like the other case studies, we abstract away a lot of the data complexity for our builders, our data scientists, so that we can immediately start ingesting the data we'll need for initial model training. And then once we iterate over a few solutions, pick a model we think is the best, we can deploy it into our shadow environments and immediately start publishing those predictions and the results of the model invocations to our shadow audit chain, which we can then use to monitor how the model is performing, ensure some basic checks are passed. And then when we're ready to go, we can deploy that model into production and actually start using it as a shopper goes through their experience. And through the same process, we can actually publish production audit chain results and then use them as training inputs into the model to improve it even further. And that's because Trino is enabling us to easily access that point in time data as it was in production, as opposed to something that has been cleaned up after the fact that takes a lot more time to get. So we have reduced friction there and can really kickstart the rapid iteration process. And as an example, in some cases, third parties, they don't return data to us in time at the point of prediction. So what we'll do, and this is a common practice, of course, we'll impute the value based on some of the historical data that we see. And what Trino allows us to do here is to easily record not only that we are imputing something, but what we're imputing, what methodology we're using to impute it, and then how often it's occurring. And all of that data, accessible in that single point of access, gives us insights into what models, how they actually perform in production with the data that's there and how the model is configured, so that we can include that information in our next model iteration. And the next model will be trained on more realistic data. And we can absolutely see how this impacts the bottom line. If I jump over to our business outcomes slide here, we can see how more robust modeling allows us to monitor a model in production against the control group. So you can see here, initially, this black line represents the percentage improvement in policy retention rates compared to the control group. We're using retention here as an indicator that following the right plan is leading to better results. So in our test group, we're using that model in production. We see initially we had better results, but then the model performance degraded. And we were able to rapidly look into this, iterate, come up with a new solution. And we see that our percentage improvement of retained policies for plans that were recommended by the model is better than our control group and has continued to increase up and to the right, which leads to a better experience overall. Shoppers are happy with their plan, agents are happy their policies are still in place. And for us, of course, more policies in place leads to higher revenues, which is a great outcome all around. So that concludes the final case study. We're coming to the end of the lightning talk here. Just in summary, Starburst and Trino have really enabled us to accelerate time to insight, improve our conversion rates, and enable robust modeling, all coalescing to achieve better business outcomes. First being that optimization of our agent licensure mix, reducing our costs, getting visibility back into our operations during critical moments that we can adjust, and then lastly, increasing revenue by recommending better products to our shoppers at the right time. So what's next for us? Just a quick thank you. I have to give a huge shout out to our data engineering team. They're the only reason I'm here today and could share these amazing outcomes with you. Like it's really not possible without them. And the Starburst enterprise team as well. I know they had a huge hand in us helping us get stood up and kind of achieve these outcomes as well, which is awesome. And then one last thing for a step forward, we're looking into new technology to help augment our data lake in Trino. So we're really looking pretty deeply into DBT to enable our data scientists to continue building out our lakehouse so that we can scale up with the business and focus on the analysis and business value instead of being bottlenecked by the size of our data engineering team, which is still scaling. So that concludes the lightning talk. Hope you enjoyed. I'm here to answer any questions to the best of my ability.